That's
This
right.
Now it is
conference will
recorded.
now be recorded.
Sorry about that.
That's right. Normally I record it, but I can't log in to
Right.
to that part of it. All
Yeah,
right.
I
Thank
get
you. Thank you, Sally, for reminding us. We do have a quorum, so we can continue with the meeting tonight. And anyone have a conflict of interest? Okay, if we get to an item where you may have a conflict, just let us know. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Public Works will remove item A3.
Thank you. I would also say that we can remove under community development items C6 and C7, since those will be taken up at the very end of the meeting. Any other changes? Okay, hearing no other changes to the agenda, if we can have a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved by Mike McKinnon.
We have, I believe,
it.
Don Kimes and then Mike McKinnon, I think. Or Stan, I don't know.
It was Mike.
Mike.
Don.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that's approved. If we can move on to the consent agenda, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. And when you make a motion, please state your name.
Mike McKinnon will motion to.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have a second?
Jeremy Graham will second the motion.
Thank you, Jeremy. And if we could have a roll call, please, when you're ready, Sally.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Mr. Kine,
Yes.
Mr. Malagranda,
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon,
Yes.
Ms. Morgan,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Rourke.
Yes.
All right, that's approved. We have nobody signed up for public comment tonight, so we can go on to committees with Public Works first.
First item is informational. As you see, the Public Works minutes from last Monday, August the 3rd, are included in the packet and would cover a lot of details that you might want to find any subject on. Item number 2, there is a letter in the packet on basically an amendment to the internal agreement between us and Rock River Reclamation District. There is one item, there's a couple items in there that the agreement basically reaffirms some verbal conversations that have taken place from the original agreement. So at some point, we're going to want to ratify that, whether we are in agreement with them. There is an open item in there in that the district would prefer to not have to cross through the village gated access to get to their portion of the property over there. And then in that agreement, they outline their desire to acquire a 2.5 acre parcel property from the village, which is shown a map on there basically to the southern portion of where the current lagoon is. However, they really didn't state whether they were making an offer of payment for that or whether they expected that property to be delivered to them at no charge. We as a committee did have a consensus that that property does have economic value, and we would propose that and authorize Chet Insko to set up a meeting with the district, which may also be attended by 1 or 2 or more trustees, to find out exactly what they would intend on doing with that property, and also to discuss, possible economic offsets on that, whether there's a cash price applied to that, or whether, increased travel that they would be using on Winnebago Street, and whether we would expect some sort of upgrades for that. So basically just, information at this point, and also solicit any feedback from any trustees on the thought about that property, and whether it would be the opinions of the trustees that that would be a sale, or try to find some economic offset for that. So are there any opinions out there? And again, the consensus of the committee was that it would not go at 0 economic benefit, there should either be a sale of that property or we get something in return for it.
Mike, this is Frank Eubank, and I agree with that philosophy. Our WRD may feel that they are giving us something already, and if so, I'd like to hear what they're giving us. Otherwise, we do need to take into account possible additional extra truck movement, as you indicated, because taking the 2.5 acre parcel, they may decide to have, use that area as a base for moving things in and out. And so that would be an increased traffic. So I think it would be good to have Chad meet with them, and I would be willing to meet with them or whomever, whichever trustees sit down and meet with them to go over, what their intentions are.
Well, we certainly felt it would be appropriate that you would also be participating in that meeting as well. And then once it's set up, again, if it's more than a couple of us, then we'd have to declare it as an open meeting. If it's just you and Chad and possibly another trustee, then we don't have to basically do it on the open meeting. So,
Okay.
So anyways, there is a recommendation by committee to authorize Chad Insco to set that meeting up.
Okay.
I would
Do you want
definitely agree with that.
And I guess we can just take a straw poll. We don't really need to vote on it from the trustees. Just, if everyone's in agreement with that. Anyone opposed to that? Okay.
Okay,
So why
Chad,
don't we-
please proceed.
Hey, can I ask a question about that document, though?
Yes.
Do we agree with the village payment of cost section in there? Because it seems inconsistent with some other things that we have, whether it was Paul's spreadsheet or it's our construction and process report. There's some inconsistencies there. So do you guys think the village of payment section I on this is accurate?
Right. We received their initial letter that had those items in it, and then we responded questioning some of those. So we are not really in agreement with their initial letter on May 16th of 2019.
Okay, I didn't know. I thought you were going to go back to them and there was going to be conversations, and maybe there has been. Is this what they're in their letter? Are they kind of saying, as we do this amendment number 2, they want to basically ratify that this is correct, and so we would have an issue with that as well? Or
Right. I mean, that's something that we want to make sure that when we sit down with them, that because it looks like the amortization schedule they have set out is one that we initially opposed. And I don't have in front of me the response that I wrote up, but it doesn't look like it's in part 1 of their letter dated July 22nd, 2020.
so this amendment number 2 is going to be a lot of back and forth before it gets ironed out, it sounds like.
That would be my thought, is when we sit down with them, we'll go over item 1 for village payment of costs to make sure of what we're settling on. Because I know Mike and Chad and I sat down and we went over this, and then Paul got involved when he was reappointed to the board. So I'll find my notes on that.
Yeah, these numbers are very consistent with Paul's spreadsheet. However, it shows a $1.3 million cash down payment for that future cost section, and I think Paul had 1.6. So obviously,
Okay.
I feel that was 1.3 based on what we're looking like today. But
Right.
But you are correct, though. That is, that's why we are not making any recommendation at this point to accept this. Obviously, there's a couple open issues that we do need to reaffirm whether those figures are correct or incorrect. And then the more recent addition on there was basically that potential property transfer that's got to be ironed out.
yeah, okay. Just curious about the numbers part of it. Thanks.
Okay, the last item again at this point is informational. During the construction over at the high school track and football field, some of the construction equipment did do some damage to the edge of the pavement on Runyard. The road certainly was not in pristine condition, and we were slating some repairs on that road, hopefully to, tie that in with the Elida Street project when it would take place, which is, in 2021 or 2022. Unfortunately, some edges of that road did get damaged, and there is probably, $6,000 to $8,000 worth of repair on that road. Chad's had some, initial conversations with the contractor and the school, and ideally it would be nice if there was an opportunity for some cooperative repair that maybe we could get the entire road upgraded, but it's certainly not within the budget of the Public Works Street Department at this point in time. So we do need to do some work back and forth. We don't believe this can be delayed until that Elida Street project, but Chad's going to be working with the school district and the contractor to find a solution to this issue. And again, although it's referenced in the Public Works notes, I just want to highlight this issue out there that hopefully we'll get some substance on here in the next few weeks.
All right, thank you, Mike. Anything else for Public Works?
No, sir.
All right. Then the next item is Village Engineer, and Seth called earlier and said he would not be able to attend the meeting. So he does have his report. He said there wasn't really anything else to update. So if you don't have any questions that you need answered by the Village Engineer, we can move on then to Community Development.
Okay, I guess I'm on.
You are, Don.
Okay, thank you. Community Development, number 1, C1. Code Enforcement Officer. I've got Casper giving me a written report on a monthly basis, and I will read through the report that he has sent me. Don, as of July 31st, all the brush overhanging the alley has been cut. The high weeds next to 206 Bel Air in Willingham subdivision have been cut as per a complaint. Also, letters have been sent out to 204 and 206 North Pecatonica Street for rubbish in their driveways in the alleyway. And that's submitted by Casper. So that's just to go into the record. Is there any comment or anything on anybody who would have a concern with some of the goings on of the village enforcement officer?
This is Mike. I don't have a comment specifically on the report other than if you're going to get that report, it would be beneficial if possibly it could be included in the packet in the future.
Yes, it would be, but since we didn't have a computer today, or I didn't have one yesterday, so couldn't get it in the packet. But I'll put it in the packet as soon as I get it. Okay, thank you, Mike. I'll do that. Okay, the number 2, the Solar Electric System Code Enforcement Ordinance and inspection requirement. Any headway on that one, Mary?
I do have a draft that I'm working on that I'll get to the Community Development Committee first for review and commentary. That should be coming in the next week or so.
Thank you, Murray. That takes care of number 2. The number 3 would be the garbage contract. I see that it's also listed on the finance. Has there been any input from your point of view, Frank? Have you met with them, or is this just strictly a finance committee problem?
No, it's something where the next step is for me to meet with Josh Kraft. He was supposed to get back to me any day now. I believe he was going to be out of town the first week of August, so I was waiting for him to respond to me once he got back.
Okay, that's okay. I don't think the contract's up until, what, 1st of October?
December 31st is when it actually expires.
Okay. All right. Well, that's okay. Thank you very much for your input.
Sure.
Number 4, the picnic tables. Got a couple emails to that. Where did you want to put them, Chad?
I had just suggested out by Faulkner Road we had one spot that would be amenable. And then also near the trailhead, downtown, an additional one could go there.
Oh, that I think would be a good idea. I'd need a motion to approve that, but personally, I'm in favor of that. Mike, you wouldn't need I need a motion.
I guess I can't make the motion because I don't know if I missed an email, but I'm not really sure what we're talking about.
Okay. There was a couple emails that were sent out as to the picnic tables. Is that we can lay it over for another meeting? What do you want to do, Frank?
I would say just if you want community development to discuss it at the community development committee meeting, it's just about picnic tables. That's an organization is putting together, I believe, as a project. So I think it'd be better if community development as a committee could listen to it and have the information and then make a recommendation to the board.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the end of the picnic table. The parking lot next to the village, it's been on again, off again, on again, off again. It was on, now it's off, and it's been a year. What are we gonna do? Don't all speak at once.
So are we looking at putting gravel on the rest of it? Is that what was supposed to be done, or asphalt?
I believe community development, gave $6,000 for gravel to have that done, and so far it hasn't been done. It's been a year. Mike?
You know, to me, it's one of those expenses that we'd like to do, but at the same time, with our budget, it's one of those expenses that we don't need to do. So I think it's something that you probably want to keep on a list for community development to keep track of, but I'm not sure it's something that it's not a need, I don't think, for the village right now to have
Frank,
additional parking.
I think community development already transferred the $6,000 to our committee to put the parking lot in. So unless I'm proven wrong on that, we've got $6,000 already invested in it. So we can discuss it? Okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
okay.
If you want to track that down, and maybe Sally Bennett can help in terms of whether any expenditures have been made with that 6,000, and then community development can keep track of the parking lot expense.
I'd be happy to look into that.
Okay, now that would have been taken out a year ago, Sally. So it's not an expenditure that you'll find in 2000 will be in 29. Okay, I guess that's it for community development. Unless somebody else has got something else they'd like to add.
I could speak just for a moment, if the board would be pleased to hear it regarding that.
Go ahead, Chad.
Based off of memory, and that's of course dangerous, we installed the 40 by 40 pad last year with some of those funds, or most of those funds, going towards that gravel that was put in. And it had been discussed that the community development and before certain committees that they would like to see that parking lot doubled in size. And we said we would be willing to undertake that, as it will. Of course, COVID stepped in, and we've been trying to operate more on a need basis. And likewise, a lot of things have been happening. It hasn't been an urgency. I will say I put it back in the docket today for my guys with the intention to put reclaimed asphalt and nearly double area to expand that. But I do want to speak to the full board for a moment that we do need to consider, we do have a developer right down the street that's wanting to put in a development, and our current UDO states that those types of areas need to be paved. So I had brought it before the committees last year while we were doing the downtown project, that we could have paved that 40 by 40 area at a price right around $12,000, that have the money for. And then again, if we do too much larger of an area, drainage will come in. But just so the board is aware, and so I can answer that problem, it's not urgent, it's not pressing. We do intend to do it. We do intend to do it with in-kind service, and but only to a degree that's reasonable. And we keep putting it on or I keep putting it on the back burner, because I really don't want to get in a situation where we're regulating a new developer to pave a gravel pad where we own one. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. That's been my thought process. We in no way, shape, or form do not intend to not do what we said we were going to do. It just simply hasn't been a high priority yet in these times.
And Chad, I appreciate you bringing that up, that we may not be in compliance with our own ordinances when we're making other people have asphalt or other similar types of finish on their parking lots. So we do need to be cognizant of that.
So again, the intent, there was discussion for that lot to be increased in size. We do have people parking there. We do have some of the vendors, the hairdresser, and I think a few other people park in the 40 by 40 that's been created, and that allows some more downtown parking space. And I do think if we increase it, it will be helpful. But if we get too much larger or too serious, I do believe we should be contemplating getting serious enough to pave it and provide drainage, and that'll turn that $6,000 into $26,000 really quick.
All right, thanks, Chad. And that is something that community development should look into, and maybe with the assistance of Chad and or Jimmy.
And I'll rebut it with, okay, we can call Jim. I put it back on the docket this morning, honestly, that we had a couple of water digs that we had to do. And again, we're watching the budget very closely. And I said, you know what, I think we can get in here and do this, but we're going to have to go half size of what the original thoughts were. We actually eyeballed it today. So it is on the radar.
Okay.
Haven't heard anything from the 4th of July committee. Has anybody on the board heard anything or any input that they're going to have for next year's meeting or committee? Has anybody heard anything?
Nope.
And where is Whipsy? Is Whipsy got anything, Frank?
Nope. Whipsy doesn't have anything at this time.
Okay. All right. Fine. Well, I guess that.
Hey, this is Nick. I have talked to Stephanie King, 4th of July committee, and she is planning to do a virtual meeting soon. And once she schedules that, she'll let me know.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks, Don. We'll move on to village attorney.
Kelly Simons brought to my attention that we had an inconsistency in an ordinance having to do with the due date of the utility bills as well as the penalty rate. And this is, so I put together an ordinance regarding that. I know some of you, because of the internet problem, possibly wouldn't have received it, but it is an ordinance to amend ordinance 2015-09 to correct a Scribner's error in relation to the utility billing due date and the late payment percentage. This is the gist of it. We previously had ordinance number 278, which was so old of an ordinance that this was one that was we only had the newspaper publication of it, and so I had to type that into an ordinance and verify it. That was from 1956, and that laid out the provision for what the due date and the penalty would be. And that, in essence, provided that the due date was the 1st of the month and the penalty was 10% if you didn't pay it on time. Then there was an ordinance 05-10, which happened in 2005, whereas the decision was made to make the due date the 15th of the month, and that the penalty would then be 15%. And then what got confusing apparently was then in 2015, we needed to make a further amendment, not having anything to do with those particular rates, but the idea of making the property owner responsible, the one responsible for signing up for the utility unless the tenant agreed in writing to do differently. And we did that because there had been a law passed that in essence said that's the way that it needed to be. When the amendment was made in order to incorporate that new language, it amended ordinance number 278, but didn't take into account what had been changed by the ordinance 05-10. So by pulling certain language from 278, that had the old due date and the old rate. But what this ordinance in essence does is say that it's correcting the Scribner's error in 2015-09 to say that it was never the intent of the board to change the percentage that had been affected by ordinance 05-10. So this gets us in accordance with what the village has been following and what the intent was, and that was in essence to have the due date on the 15th and to provide a 15% penalty rate, which is what I understand the village has been following. So that's the point of that document. It's a cleanup document.
Thanks, Mary. So, go ahead.
Go ahead, Frank.
I was just going to say, so we have the ordinance before us. If someone wants to make a motion to adopt it.
Please.
This is Julie. I'll make the motion.
So we have Mike McKinnon that made the motion. Julie, do you want to second the motion?
Sure.
All right, now we can talk about any discussion.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, nice job, Kelly, for catching that when you were doing a different project. So that was great. I guess my question to you, Mary, is are there any risks to this? The fact that we kind of had an ordinance with different rates that we were charging.
I don't see that as a practical matter, it's going to be a big deal. The bottom line is you get it changed as soon as you notice the issue, because if somebody wants to challenge an ordinance, they only have a year to do it. So presuming that this ordinance takes effect, then in essence, we have corrected for past activities, and then nobody can challenge it. If we had somebody come forth, then potentially we would need to adjust it. But I think the likelihood of that isn't very great.
Okay, thanks.
And if it is going to be considered, we do need an ordinance number.
2020-09.
And Sally, I delivered the bond bond copy.
Yep, I have
Frank's
it.
office. So that is.
I have it.
All right. Can I sign it tomorrow then?
Sure, I'll leave it in your box,
That's
Sally,
fine.
if it's
Okay.
approved.
All right. I will
And
do it.
the only other thing I wanted to mention with this is I did provide that it would be recorded, which I will do. I'll record the original of it with the Winnebago County Recorder's Office. I've been doing that as of late with especially some of these ordinances that impose penalties and things of that nature, just so that we can make sure for purposes of posterity it's recorded and out there. Because I know when I was trying to find for a totally different reason several years ago, ordinance number 278, I discovered what I told you, that there was only the newspaper version of it. And so this way, if these documents are recorded, then they're there forever.
Well, isn't 2015-09 recorded also?
It is. It is. And that's why I said it's been my pattern to try to go back and that one was recorded right away, but some of the older ones I've gone back and recorded more for posterity purposes than anything.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, if we could have a roll call, please.
Mr. Kine,
Yes.
Mr. Malagranda,
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon,
Yes.
Ms. Morgan,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Rourke,
Yes.
Mr. Graham.
Yes.
All right, so that passed unanimously. Anything else, Mary?
No, other than I just wanted to mention that when you read the Public Works Committee minutes, you'll see the information on the Mantle Development lawsuit. In essence, both Alan Tanner was served in New Zealand as well as Attorney Art Keelty as his registered agent. And Attorney Art Keelty has entered an appearance on behalf of Mantle Development Group. I have not yet received, but I suspect that I will receive some sort of then formal pleading, whether it be in the form of a motion or in the form of an answer. And the first court date, which is just a case management conference, is on August 27th at 9 o'clock. So I trust that I'll probably receive something from him by that point. Just as a possible point of interest, I will tell you that the process server informed me that when they went to serve Alan Tanner in New Zealand, they did serve him at Hawke's Bay Hospital, where I told them I believed he worked. They asked if he was Alan Tanner, and he did identify himself, but at first refused to take the documents, but then later did actually accept the service of the documents.
All right, thank you for the update, Mary, on that, and let us know what you find out from Attorney Keelty.
Okay, will do.
All right, let's move on to Finance Committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Talking about the first issue here, the 2020 budget COVID expenses. As we got paperwork previously regarding the reimbursement potential under the CARES Act, first off, just want to let you guys know that Kelly has been creating a spreadsheet and tracking all of the expenses, so thank you very much for that. But one of the discussion points that we talked about at Finance was the potential for laptops for both Sally and Kelly, as they are doing a majority of their work at home and they have desktops at the office. A few things with that, obviously it would be mobile. The intent would be to replace the desktops that they have currently at the office with a type of docking station in which they could take their laptop, use it at work, and then pop it and bring it home when they need to for that. Looking at that, we believe it is going to be covered under the CARES Act, but we were unsure, and this might be a Mary point, since the technology is older on their previous desktops and they would be needing new ones soonish, would this be a gray area since we're technically upgrading them technology-wise, but it is for CARES. It is for home use due to COVID.
Well, I've listened in on and I've read the materials having to do with the CARES Act. I've listened in also on the seminars that they have been providing, and I think it would be acceptable. And the reason that I say that is that just because you have an old computer doesn't necessarily mean you're going to replace it. Many people go on with their computers for some period of time. So I think that there's a justifiable reason that is due to COVID that we need to get them mobile ones because of the fact that they need to work at home at certain times, and because of the fact of a lack of vaccine and the uncertainty is when that vaccine may be available, that it could also happen at any time. So I don't think that we would have to, in essence, take some reduction for the fact that it would otherwise maybe have to get a new computer. Because I haven't heard anything that says that their computers are not functional. It's just because of COVID, they need an alternative way to access and get information.
And really, there are those 5 questions that you ask, And one of them would be, would we have incurred this expense? Would we have bought these, but for COVID? And we would not be really looking at these mobile laptops, but for this situation. And then secondarily, did we budget for laptops? And we did not budget for them. It's not as though we contemplated changing out the old with new. So that's kind of what Mary was talking about, is if we didn't budget for it and we weren't going to plan to change them out, and it's because of COVID, I think it would fall under the CARES Act and allow us to use those funds.
And that would be precisely the type of information that we would list when these requests are made. One of the matters emphasized in the presentation is keeping and getting together your documentation as you go along and your justification. And that's what Kelly and I had talked about. And I know Sally Bennett had spoken to Kelly as well. But they're, in essence, keeping a running list of items as well as trying to update the justifications as they go along.
All right. So I believe we have a figure here. It was $1,650 for laptop, dock, and everything, give or take. It was an estimated number. So we're looking at approximately $3,500 for that, based off of the amount of money that we are expected to receive or able to receive from the government. That would still keep us well under the maximum. Looking for more of a straw poll for anyone on the board who is not in favor of moving forward with this. All right, not hearing anything, I assume that means we are good to go. So we will keep looking into that and then move forward from there.
And if I could just comment, while we are talking about the CARES Act matter, I did mention it at Public Works, and I believe Kelly spoken to the police department, but everybody I think needs to make sure you keep your thinking caps on as to what various expenditures that would benefit the village that are COVID related. Now I understand that this is a reimbursement program, so you have to spend the money first and you have to have it to spend, and there's no guarantee, of course, that there would be the reimbursement. But they did mention in the presentation that every municipality is given a certain amount, and I believe ours is about $120-some thousand that we would be eligible for. But what they're going to be doing, and there are certain time frames for submission, that once they determine if a given municipality doesn't appear that it's going to use its allotment, then they're going to open it up for some other municipality to get it. So my point is, we just want to make sure that the village is taking advantage of whatever portion of the money it's allotted for potential reimbursement that it can afford based on expenditures.
Something else to keep in consideration if you're talking about that is if Comcast is coming down to the village, our MediaCom service is not always the best. And so is that something that we could also, if we have a connection charge, is that something we could put under the COVID expense because we need reliable service? So things like that we may want to look at, and if possible, try and get it within the expense before December 31st. I think that's the cutoff. So just keep in mind, like Mary said, all the different types of expenses. Think outside the box as to what may be included in that and what may help the village.
And then as far as the reimbursement process, that's whenever you spend, you can fill out the forms for reimbursement, or is there certain times that we would send in for reimbursement?
And Kelly, you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have my notes in front of me. But as I understood it, there was a time frame when you could begin to present them, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. So I do think that you can do it progressively, but they're not quite ready yet, as I recall.
Right, and Mary, I think you're right about that. I don't know the start date. But I also was reading something recently, I think it was from IML, that to preserve the 127,000 or the amount that we have, if we haven't used it all by a certain date, we can I think you can kind of say, well, we have a plan for some additional expenses, and then you can kind of hold on to your portion beyond a certain date so that they don't take your portion and mix it with everybody else's. So there is a way to try and hold on to it, I think, for a little bit longer period, as long as you map out kind of what expenses you may be looking at.
That is true, except, you know, the emphasis was, without using this exact language, it cannot be pie in the sky sort of things. You know,
Right.
to say, we think we're really going to do this, but when you have really no intention of doing it. So, I mean, I'm sure there's some good faith there, but as I recall, there were a couple of different dates, and I can grab those out and then I can share them with everyone so that it gives you some extra time, but then there's kind of a drop dead date where they're like, okay, we don't want to lose out on this money from the federal government. So we want to make sure that if you said you're going to do it, you really are. And that if we determine you're not, let someone else have the opportunity.
Yep.
All right. Pending any other questions on number one, we're going to move on to number two. All right. So our second one, our contract was up with First National Bank this year. It was actually at the beginning of the year, give or take. So we reached out to German American to see what other banks could offer us. After Sally had an opportunity to talk with them and they submitted their proposal to us, while there was a couple of positives for going with German American, for example, it was a $60 safety deposit box we got for free. While there was nothing wrong with German American, we felt as a committee that it was more beneficial to stick with First National at this time. So this is coming from committee to allow Frank to sign the contract with First National for the duration, which would be the rest of this year and I believe next year as well. And at that point, we can see where we are and move forward from there.
Okay, so since you said it's coming from committee, we don't need a second. Any discussion on that motion? All right, hearing no discussion, if we could have a roll call, please.
I'm writing just a second.
Yep, whenever you're ready, Sally.
She went faster than I could write. Mr.
That's
Malagranda.
okay.
Mr. Malagranda.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon.
Yes.
Ms. Morgan.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Rourke.
Yes.
Mr. Graham.
Yes.
Mr. Kine.
Yes.
All right, so that's approved and I just signed it. So Kelly, I will go ahead and put that in your box.
All right. The third one on here was already discussed in community development, and we are waiting to hear back from that, and we can push that forward till next month or the month after that. Moving on to number 4. I discussed that in number 1 there. I don't know why we didn't see that before, but that moves up to number 5. Number 5. So at the beginning of COVID, you guys as a board, I wasn't on the board at the time, agreed to hold late fees for water. And I would like to open up the discussion on how long we would like to continue holding late fees. In addition with that, when should we start sending notices? And this was all really brought up because of a potential lien on a property. But the discussion was, can we put a lien on a property when we have not been charging late fees or notifying people that they haven't been paying as a whole?
We didn't say anything in there that we wouldn't put a lien on past due amounts. But they're still getting bills, correct? That would show that it's just increasing, I would assume.
I agree with Mary that I guess there are two different things. One is if you have someone that wasn't paying and it continues to grow, that's different than assessing a late fee. Now, if the person didn't pay the month before we suspended any, didn't have any late fees, and they were late for the first month and then COVID hit, and now they haven't paid since then, I'd be reluctant to move forward and put a lien. But if it was somebody that had 3 or 4 months or so of non-payment, then COVID hit, that's the type of person that we could put a lien on the property. And putting a lien on the property doesn't necessarily affect the property owner until that property is sold. And at that point, then it's something that could be paid out of the proceeds from the sale.
I guess
So,
what
Frank,
we've done. Go ahead, Julie.
Well, I guess I'm confused by that because so you would put a lien on someone who was delinquent pre-COVID, but not one that's delinquent now as long as they started post-COVID.
Right. If somebody's right. Because to me, the situation of COVID is that somebody could have lost a job. And if they refuse to pay beforehand, I would be less likely from my position to allow that person to keep not paying, as opposed to somebody who was paying all along and then for whatever reason lost a job or lost income during this time is unable to pay. And so if we know the circumstances, that would be even better. If we know why the person isn't paying, that would be part, I guess, of what I would want to factor into it.
I guess, have we done any analysis to see, what is our past due account balances versus what would have occurred before COVID? And, is this a huge issue? Is this a minor issue? Do we have any information to believe that, there are people that may be abusing our generosity, or do we have any of that information available?
So Sally and Kelly did put together that type of information, and that was emailed out to the finance committee. However, the way that at least I'm looking at it, and I believe Julie is too, the numbers don't necessarily add up to how we're picturing. So we want to figure that out first before we present that fully to the board. I guess the real question with the late fees is, we don't have to make a decision tonight, but when do we want to start looking at this? Do we want to wait until it's all over? Are we thinking December?
Yeah, I will say when we looked at the aging report that was in a finance committee last week, there were about, I want to say, I didn't count them, but maybe 25 new currently delinquent residents, which is the first time I think we've had a number that large. And for Kelly, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong. It just seems like there was a bigger number that was newly delinquent. And so our 120, there's a bunch of them over 120 days, but the numbers are not very big. Some of them just need to be written off, quite honestly. So I'm really focusing on the people that have current 90-day and 120-day balances. And I think we're getting more, like I said, about 25 more people, give or take, that are currently delinquent with this last billing. So the problem seems to be growing to me, and Kelly would probably concur with that.
So are you seeing those that 25 delinquents, are they not paying anything each month, or are they paying something but just not enough to pay the whole thing?
That's a mix of both, honestly. We have some people who seem to disregard the notices and phone calls. And we do have some who pay a little, but it doesn't significantly cover the past due. But there's no deterrent for them to take care of the past due balances because there's no shutoffs and there's no penalties.
Right.
I think what we wanted to do, and just as I started drilling down the numbers, I started questioning a few things. So I think our finance probably needs to spend a little more time on it. Do you think, Jeremy?
I would agree. And that way we can come with a better understanding.
And
And
Sally, I
this-
know you calculated a rough estimate of the late fees that we've given up. I don't know if you remember that number, if you remember it, Jeremy.
It's around 11,000.
Okay.
I'm sorry, how much was that number you cut out?
In the ballpark of 11,000.
That's a lot of money.
Well, I'm less concerned about the loss of the late fees than I am about just not getting paid for the fees for the water that should have been paid in the first place.
Right. And,
Yeah,
and
so
again,
that's-
going back to the issue of late fee versus putting a lien, again, you can put a lien on somebody's property and they can pay it off, and then the lien can be released. And that's really our protection for a village to be paid. And if that property owner is not going to sell the property for 2 years, we put a lien on there, then it allows the property owner to pay us 8 months from now, a year from now, and for us to release the lien. So without really, it protects the village in that respect. So we have some opportunity to try and collect our money at some point, but it's not putting an immediate burden on the cash flow of the property owner. So, I think it's an opportunity that we can use that, because it's not making them pay right away. And then
Well,
further discussion. Go ahead.
What does it cost the village to file a lien?
$35.
So,
and then
I mean,
my follow-up question to that would be, it's a growing balance though too. So if you have someone that owes us $500, I assume we can only put a $500 lien on, but in 3-6 months it's another $200, right?
Right.
But what also happens there, well, first of all, let me go back one step, and that is that I had previously created a form for the village to use, and so Kelly's using that. So therefore, there aren't legal fees that are incurred when we have to put a lien on the property, unless there are questions, that would come up in that regard. But that's why we've hopefully been able to streamline that process. And then the other thing is that when we put that lien on, there is some language that we use, and I don't have the form in front of me, that would allow for, I believe, as the balance increases, that would also be taken into account. I've seen that done with the city of Rockford, and I think I incorporated that into ours, but I will double check.
I do believe it is.
You're not constantly filing liens.
Right.
Like, okay, this month it's for 100, and then next month it's another 100. It's language that's in there, as I recall, that accounts for the fact, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, but accounts for the fact that it will be potentially an increasing balance, and that at the time that it's paid, they would contact the village to find out what is the amount that's going to cost to release this lien.
Correct. That is stated in that lien notice. And a couple of weeks ago, I sent out about 6 to 8 letters, which is initial step in the lien process. And last week, I should have sent out the second step or second phase of those letters to inform them that we would begin the lien process. Then they have another 14 days to respond to that. And that's why I hesitated, because I didn't know if I should advance to that second stage. I was hoping the initial letter would get a response, and it really didn't.
Yeah, the only I agree. I think we should continue on with the lien process. I think we just wanted to bring it to the board as far as philosophically. Do we have an idea of when we might want to turn late fees back on, or are we just paying it by month based on what's going on in the world? And then secondly, to your pre and post delinquency, pre and post COVID delinquency, Frank, that creates an administrative nightmare, I would think, to figure all that out. And to me, I don't know. I don't know that it feels right. I mean, they didn't pay the lien. I think would apply to everyone. And as you say, the lien doesn't really hurt them in the near term. It's just pay what's due when you're ready to sell, or pay it down when you're better prepared to do so.
Sure.
Just my opinion.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. Just thinking about it too, I believe Governor Pritzker, they're talking about they had a moratorium on evictions, and I believe that's going to stop after August 22nd. But now they've got, I think, funding in place where people can apply to receive money to pay towards their rent. So what I would kind of look at is I would look at other governmental bodies as to what they're doing with their suspension of things. And maybe we do look to see, okay, what is the county doing for any of their items? Are they suspending fees on certain things for a period of time, and are they lifting them? And I would look at, at least another month of not adding late fees, and then maybe we address it at the September board meeting.
I think that makes sense. I think Kelly, just for lien purposes, should we have her continue to move forward?
Right now, I would be in favor of that. But again, if Finance Committee wants to take the opportunity to discuss it, knowing the discussion tonight, I have no problem waiting also for Finance Committee to discuss it and bring it back to the September board meeting.
The only issue, of course, you would run into is that if you don't have the lien in place and someone sells their property,
Right.
then we don't have, well, there's nothing to protect the village.
Well, isn't water though, isn't that something that the title companies are now required to contact the village? And if they don't, it can be the title company that suffers that? Because I thought Kelly contacted each of the title companies and gave them copies of our ordinances.
I wasn't aware she had done that, and I know that for the city of Rockford, that they do make contact with the city, but honestly, I didn't know that they were required to do that. I just knew that was their arrangement.
That's what this ordinance correction was all about, was because I do have the document ready to send to all the title companies. But because of the errors, I didn't want, because they wanted me to reference our ordinances in that, I wanted to make sure our ordinance was correct before I sent that to them.
Okay.
So now that the ordinance is correct, I can now forward to all the title companies this form, which would require them to contact us moving forward.
This is Carrie. I just wanted to add real quickly that more recently I have seen a lot of title companies reaching out to me for final bills on properties that they know have a closing up. So I think that title companies are kind of moving towards that. So by Kelly, finishing what she's working on, I think that's just going to put us in the right direction with everything, honestly.
That's good to hear.
So really, it's up to the trustees, I guess, tonight, how you want to proceed. If you want to have finance take a look at it, if you want to have Kelly send out the letters now, I suppose we can ask each of the trustees how you'd like to proceed.
This is Mike. I would like to see us continue to move forward on the lien process, and we can have the finance committee evaluate a little further when we reinstate the late fees.
And Mike, and thank you for that, because with the way you said it, it's a letter that I think Kelly said we send out and gives them 14 more days. So again, it's not as though we send a letter and we immediately put a lien on the property. So it would allow us to move forward and send the letter out and get that into motion, and allow finance to talk about it. So Lori, what do you think?
I would agree. I think, sorry, can you hear me now?
No. Yep.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we need to send some notice in advance to give people a heads up, so that I just think it's good PR, the village takes enough hit on some decisions we make, and at least they can't say that they weren't notified.
Don, what do you think?
Well, I thought we did have a shut-off notice and a reinstatement fee at one time. I didn't know that that was no longer in place, but you're right. I feel sorry for somebody who has a problem because of something they had no control over. But it seems as though in order for us to make sure that we are compensated for a service that we have already provided, I think the lien and the process should be all right, but I think the lien should be at a certain level. If it gets to be over $300 or something like that, then you proceed with the lien. Other than that, you just would have something you would say that we'd like some payment on this particular bill. If not, when it gets to this particular point, we put a lien on your property. I know that that's happened to several properties that have been sold here in Winnebago, that we did not get a penny for the water when the property was sold. So you are correct, Frank. We didn't get anything. So, and we have some water bills that are kind of, shall we say, a little bit over the. When you get over $250 on the water bill, I think that's a good way to start. But we have to have something to make sure that we can recover our expenses, because we've already given the product away.
Sure. Thanks, Don. Stan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with what Mike had said. Just let the finance go through, but we do need to send out the lien notice of giving them another 14 days in order to correct the situation.
Okay. So Jeremy and Julie, then I guess you've heard, and so I guess we would go forward with sending out the notice. Kelly would send out the notice, and then finance can take it up and talk more about it.
Sounds good.
I agree.
Okay. Anything else, Jeremy, from finance?
Pending any questions, that concludes finance.
All right, thank you. And nothing from police committee, correct?
That's correct.
All right. We'll go on to my items. You've got my report. If there's any questions, let me know. Second item, we have Comcast. We had several people from the village join a phone call with Comcast, Joan Sage and Pat Pierce. It was part of my report. We had a discussion with them about them bringing Comcast down to the village office and other village buildings, and same thing with Winbrook Sioux Fire Department. They did reach out. They wanted copies of our bills, and they're reviewing them. I do not believe that we've heard back from Comcast as to how they could save us money, what they would charge us, if there's any cost to connect to the HyperBuild. One thing Pat Pierce from Comcast did tell us is there's two things that we can get out of this. You can either get the fiber if you just need internet, or if you need TV and or phones, then you have to have the coaxial cable or cable coming in rather than the fiber coming into your building. So some businesses may be able to take, and there will be businesses in between, obviously, where they started with Foresight Financial and the village, and they're going to be contacting, I believe, the businesses in between to see if any of those places would like to join in and help defray the cost of the HyperBuild down towards the village office. So just keeping that in mind, we'll let you know as soon as we get any information. I believe Kelly or Jeff White. I'm not sure which one of you is the point person. I know, Jeff, you mentioned something today about them believing they're going to be built out down here by September 30th.
Yeah, it's Jeff White. I've had phone calls back and forth with Pat. After he received the bills that we've got, he's trying to determine which company for what bills and what was being provided and all that. And I had a number of almost like 8 of our communication services that we use. Those other Frontier, those other ones, I just heard the number 600 come out of his mouth, so I don't know if that's an accurate number. I could probably provide the same. Sounds like he can provide the same services that we're getting right now for about 600. I can't guarantee that, but that's just kind of through conversation.
Okay. So,
there was no given out or cost.
Okay.
If you have questions you want me to ask them, for the future, I talk to him probably 2 or 3 times a week normally. For me, I got questions for him. So if anybody has questions, send me an email and I will make sure I cover those points with him and then get an answer back to you.
Okay. Yep. So if we do get a proposal, obviously just let us know what that will entail.
Sure, if he's going to do that, he'll probably reach out to everyone that was involved, as far as the breakdown of what the cost would be for the fire department, for us, for, phone service and the service. I'm sure that since he has everyone's email, I'm sure he was sending, but if for some reason I get it without anybody else, I will surely forward it to everyone else.
Okay. And I see we've got a new caller on, caller 15, if you want to identify yourself.
I don't know if that was me, Frank. I had to call back in as I accidentally hung up.
Oh, okay. That could be. I can't see who's talking, so I'm assuming it's you. Yep. All right. Thanks, Lori. All right. So we can go on to number 3 then, with Rock River Energy Services. We have we had a contract with Constellation to provide us with electricity, and that has, I believe, expired or will be expiring this month. And so Rock River Energy Services has gone out to the marketplace to see what bids they could get for us. And you should have received a sheet dated August 5th of 2020 showing Constellation, Dynegy, Direct Energy, MC2, Santana, Titan, and AEP as providers with the rate. And what we want to do tonight is determine which provider, if any, you want to move forward with, and for what duration, for what term you want to move forward with. I don't know if Charles Dana is on the call. I don't believe he called in, but he's from Rock River Energy Services. Does Public Works, has this been discussed at Public Works at all, or no?
No, it has not.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So the low bid, if we're looking at a 3-year contract, would be AEP. If we're looking at a 1 or 2 year, then Titan is the low bidder. We don't necessarily have to go with the low bidder. We can go with whomever we want. One thing that I've learned, and when we've done these for the residents, is that sometimes you don't always go with the low bidder because you don't know how the service is going to be or how the company will be. And typically Rock River Energy would provide us with each company's, like for Constellation, they would tell us, okay, how many municipalities have they supplied? Are they currently representing 2 municipalities in Illinois or 100 municipalities? And we don't have that information, or at least I don't have that information from Rock River Energy. So I've not heard of AEP or Titan. I've heard of the top four: Constellation, Dynegy, Direct Energy, and MC2, but I haven't heard of the bottom three. So I don't know, again, whether you want to go with one of those or if you want to go with one that we know of, although it's going to be a higher rate.
And again, this is not the aggregation program. This is just our commercial usage for the village.
Correct. It's just for the Village of Winnebago office, the public works and our usage, not the residents.
Water pumps, buildings, and so forth.
Correct. Yep.
So Frank, I read in something that you sent out that there could be a charge to change suppliers. Do we pay a charge on top of it to switch to a different provider? Do you know?
We shouldn't have to pay to go, because Constellation is done. So if we choose one of the other ones, there should not be a fee that we pay.
I think that was in the Titan document that you sent. It said there could be a fee to change suppliers, and so I just asked.
Right, and I have not had the opportunity to read through these documents. Each one talks about whether there's early termination fees, what'll happen if the rate changes, like if the ComEd rate goes down to, let's say, 0.062, that would be by far lower than any of the suppliers. The contracts normally will say that either our supplier, whomever it is, would be able to provide it at that rate, or we could break away from that supplier and go to ComEd without any penalty. That I don't know. It talks about how we can cancel, like with Titan, it says we can cancel without penalty anytime before midnight on the 10th calendar day after the date of enrollment. If we move to another location and provide a forwarding address, we can cancel if they don't service. It says that if Titan Gas and Power is no longer able to economically continue this agreement, they may terminate this agreement at any time after complying with applicable regulations. So again, that means if the price goes up to 0.10, which is way higher than 0.06, they may not be able to continue that price either. So I apologize. I just haven't had the time to look through this, and generally there is either Mike Mudge or Charles Dana available to answer all of these questions that you might have.
Yeah, I've never even heard of Titan.
No.
I can tell you that Santana is common in Rockford for residential.
Okay.
That's a pretty well-known company here.
So Santana has the second best, but they have a max term of 22 months. Whereas Titan can go up to 3 years.
Being that the rates are not particularly favorable, I don't know that you want to go out 3 years anyways.
Right.
I mean, obviously we've had a step up in cost from what we did from August 2017. I don't pay as much attention to these rates as I did for the last 20 years. So I don't know what current market pricing is on the commercial market.
Well, and Mike, the current ComEd rate supposedly is 0.07026. So when we're getting Constellation, Dynegy, and MC2 or MC squared, those are all higher than the current ComEd rate. Now, again, ComEd could go higher next year, but currently it's lower than those. So we can either just go to ComEd's current rate and just do that until we decide we want to go with a company to lock in, or we can lock in with Santana for 1 year at 0.0693 or 22-month for 0.06976, or lock in with Titan for a 1 or 2 year.
Yeah,
That
I
would
guess
be-
until we got comfortable with their contractual language or whatever, I'd be hesitant to do that at this point.
So is everyone else kind of leery about jumping into a contract tonight?
I am.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this would be better suited if Kelly, maybe you could try and set up a phone call with somebody at Rock River, whether it's Charles Dana or Mike Mudge or Mary or somebody, with me, and we can talk about this and find out, some of this information. And then if it seems like we need to bring it back at the September meeting, we can do that with more information.
Yeah.
I will contact him. I thought he was going to be on the call tonight to answer questions.
Right,
But-
right. And normally they are, so I don't know if they were unable to log in or with the storm, if they had issues. So if we
Yeah.
can make contact with them soon, then we can follow up and let everybody know.
Yeah, because
Definitely.
typically when they secure these bids, they're fairly time sensitive, and a lot of times you only have 24 to 48 hours to agree to them. Otherwise, they got to rebid them.
That's correct, and that's why, I was hoping he would be here to let us know that. So yeah, the sooner we can make contact with them, the better. And if we need, we've done this in the past where we've had a special board meeting for just this topic. So if we find out that, hey, we're going to get good rates, but we only have 5 days to secure it, then I can contact everybody and see if you want to have a special board meeting or how we want to handle it.
Fine.
If I remember correctly, I think the expiration of the last contract was August 3rd. So I know it's probably something we have to respond to pretty quickly.
Well, what will happen is we defer back to the ComEd rate. So we're
Okay.
going to be, that's the way it should work, is that ComEd should be billing us now, and maybe we can verify that ComEd is going to be doing that. But right now, as they have written on this information for us, ComEd is 0.07026, and ComEd's rate, I believe, has to stay the same for a period of time, and then they announce when it will go up and what it will go up to. So we should have advanced notice of if that rate's going to change.
I think it's typically an annual rate.
I think you're right, Mike.
I will email him first thing in the morning.
All right. Thank you. And then, just copy me on it, and then we'll figure out what we need to do.
Very good.
Okay, so let's move on to number 4. We have a proposal from Rockford Tech Systems and Jay Pitney for installation of the window in the vestibule area of the village office, and then also to put a similar type of electric lock system as we have on the interior door, to put that on the exterior door. And looking for really ratification of that expenditure, because it's already, in essence, been approved. I already signed off on it, but I just need your approval to make sure that that's okay.
And what was that final amount? Like $4,500 or something?
I believe it was $4,268.37. So what I would do is just, authorize the village president to sign that proposal from Rockford Tech Systems and Pitney Construction to total $4,268.37.
And Frank, this is
I will
Lori.
make
I
that
just
motion.
wanted,
Go ahead, Lori.
I just wanted it documented in the minutes that I abstained from voting on this due to a conflict of interest, and that my dad is one of the owners of Rockford Tech Systems.
And Mary, again, I'm not sure if we've addressed this before, but if I have a client that is part of a company that is giving a proposal, do I have to disclose that, or?
I would disclose it. I don't see that that prevents you from voting. I mean, that's your choice. If you wish to abstain, I guess it would only be if your representation of that client would give you some inside information into this particular matter.
Okay. All right. So I have represented an individual in that company as to other matters, not this matter.
So before that conversation came up, this is Mike McKinnon, and I would vote to reaffirm this decision and authorize President Eubank to sign the necessary paperwork to move forward.
Do we have a second?
This is Jeremy Graham, and I will second that motion.
All right, thank you. Any additional discussion?
Just for clarification, Frank, when you said you had represented an individual in that company, there were two names, Rockford Tech System and Pitney Construction.
Correct. It would be Rockford Tech Systems.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Right. Any other discussion? Okay, if there's no discussion, roll call, please. Sally, can you hear me?
Why do I not see her on this? Oh, there, she's still on the screen.
Sally Huggins, are you still there?
Are you on mute?
She's not on mute, but she's got like the 3 dots in her name, so I don't know if that means, I don't know what that means, honestly.
Okay.
But in the
Kelly?
upper right-hand corner, it has 3 dots and then says Sally H underneath.
All right. So we cannot hear Sally Huggins. Kelly, since you're the backup, do you have the ability to take minutes at this point? To take notes?
Did we lose her too?
Unfortunately, it is being recorded, so that.
I'm here.
Okay, Kelly.
Yes, I have been taking notes as well.
Okay, so what I would ask Kelly is if you could go through and actually take the record of the vote, and I'll go ahead and call out the names.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and take a roll call, so I'll go ahead and do that. So Stan Malagranda.
Yes.
Julia O'Rourke.
Yes.
Lori Morgan.
Abstain.
Jeremy Graham.
Yes.
Mike McKinnon.
Yes.
And Don Kimes.
Yes.
All right, so that's approved unanimously. Okay. And Sally Huggins, if you can hear us, but you can't, if you're unable to say anything to us, if you get the opportunity, keep trying to talk, and if we hear you, we'll let you know. We'll move on to item 5, which is boardroom equipment for recording. And I believe Kelly sent out to everybody information in order for us to have in-person. Yes, Sally, yes, I can hear you.
Sorry, I hit the mute button. That's my fault.
That's okay. That's
Okay,
what people
go ahead.
thought, but as you heard, so, all right, so now we got you back talking. All right, so the boardroom, we're looking at how we can have in-person meetings when we're ready to go ahead and do that. And part of it is we'll need a recording system, camera recording system, and a microphone. And also, we would need to have some type of monitors. And Kelly was able to put together a quote for approximately $4,000. And she also has a diagram kind of how it would look in the village boardroom. And again, these types of expenditures we would be looking to get reimbursed. So as Mary has pointed out, we first have to spend the money, and then we have to ask to be reimbursed for this expenditure. So if you want to move forward with this tonight, we could take a motion to do that. If you want to discuss it, we can have a motion and a second to discuss it and decide if you want to vote on it, or we can table it to the next meeting if anybody wants to look into it or see how our finances are or anything like that. So I just put it on my part of the agenda to bring it up, and I'll let the trustees kind of determine how you want to take it from here.
So this is Mike. Kelly and I had communicated on this, but I think if my understanding of the feedback I got from her is it's more like $6,500 because you had $2,500 of equipment and a $4,000 setup fee.
Oh, okay.
Is that understanding correct, Kelly? No, the $4,000 number is the equipment itself. Then there would be a setup fee, which she did not give an estimate of the setup fee. So, and I do also want to consider that if we did get the laptops, one of the PCs could also be used in place of what was in the quote itself.
So that quote was $699, so we could save approximately $700. So,
right.
If any of the trustees if we're comfortable looking at having our September board meeting remotely, then I would suggest that we maybe look at addressing this tonight, but get a little more information as to what the setup fee would be.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. And Governor Pritzker, go ahead.
This is Jeremy. I do as well, but I'd also like to see we've submitted for a reimbursement from the state, and we've gotten it before we continue to spend in hopes that this works.
Yeah.
Could I comment on that? And I was having trouble with my mic previously when we were talking about the cures. And at the last meeting, they were supposed to have sent out notices last week, and I haven't received it yet. But this week, I do believe, is another webinar about the submission process, which is going through a third party called, their name is Crows. And they will be processing the claims, which that hasn't been released yet either, which is another platform that we would upload the expenses to. So that information should be coming out this week when we can start to upload those documents.
So the idea,
Kelly, as soon as I receive that information, I'll let you know.
Okay. So Jeremy, you're kind of looking at a couple of things. One is if the village can submit some items we've already spent, to see if we can get reimbursed ourselves, but then also maybe see if other communities have submitted for other things and been reimbursed, as to how easily they get the money back. Is that kind of what you're looking at?
That is correct. And I have no problem pushing off till next month anyway, as you discussed. But in addition to that, just liking to see this process actually work.
Yep.
Yeah. That information is coming out really, really slow.
The other thing is, we have the federal government that passed this act, and each state has to implement it. And the state of Illinois had certain rules that were set, and then JCAR met and modified some of those rules. But I think they were meeting today, or they're meeting very soon, to further discuss the rules for DCEO. And the IML is trying to push to make it even easier, to not have quite as few hoops to jump through. So hopefully we'll find out later this week if IML has been successful in lobbying JCAR and DCEO to ease up on those restrictions. They want it to be as easily as set out by the federal government. They don't want additional barriers that DCEO has put in for claiming the money. So that'll also help us understand how easily it will be to get the funds back.
And I believe the webinar that Kelly's talking about is going to be on August 14th. At least that's what we were previously told.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that'll be good because it'll allow for the opportunity to see if DCEO or JCAR has been able to address any changes in rules, and then allow us enough time before our next board meeting to know what the process will be.
Hopefully. I need to call them tomorrow to find out where the certification letter is at. They said they would be sending them out. And we have not received ours yet that I am aware of.
Okay. All right, so we will then set this item over for the next meeting. So Kelly, if you could just make a note to put boardroom equipment for recording back on the September agenda for us. And then we'll move on to village property and casualty insurance. I was contacted by a gentleman named David Ballantyne. He came to the village 3-4 years ago or so. He was with, I believe, Corkle Insurance at the time when we went out to compare IML to a different insurance carrier for our risk management insurance. It's kind of hard to compare those, but when we finally received the information from both of them, we felt that staying with IML was our best, or IML RMA actually was our best way to go financially. Now that we've had some property claims for personal property as well as real property, I know Chad has not been overly enthusiastic and dealing with IML, had some issues with them. So what we could do is we can go out to seek other, I guess, bids, or just see what other insurance companies can provide to us and compare it with what we have for. Just wanted to know if you want us to move forward in looking at that.
Isn't there a lot more to that, Mary?
All right, Sally Joe, what was your question?
I was asking Mary, isn't there a lot more to that as far as the liability?
Yes, I was waiting before I jumped in to see what other people had to say. The only commentary I would have there is that if you choose to go and look at other entities, please make sure you're comparing apples to apples, because part of what the IML RMA it deals with for the village is, in essence, you know, our liability on a whole variety of issues. And they have very knowledgeable staff about municipal law and what is required, what we can do, what we cannot do. And I'm certainly not adverse to always, you know, looking at the marketplace, but we just want to make sure that it is a company that is not just a plain old insurance company, so to speak, but one that is experienced in and well versed in the municipal law aspect of it.
And there's no time frame that we really have to look at. The only thing is we do have to provide IML RMA supposedly at least 120 days of notice if we're going to back out. And I believe it's calendar. If you remember, Mary, or anybody else, I think it's supposed to be. 120 days
Right.
prior to December 31st. And Mary, when we talked to some people from IML, I believe they kind of intimated that, well, it really didn't matter. As long as you gave your notice, that's okay.
That's what I recall too. I mean, we never had that in writing from them, but that was in essence their position. They weren't going to force you to stay with them.
So in that sense, we can really look at this any time of the year. It's not as though we have to do it and give notice by, August, so that at the end of December 31st, we would have to leave IML RMA.
And
I would
guess
say
my
one of the
question-
big,
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that, just from the feedback that Chad's had to deal with, I'd say the biggest issue seems to be is whoever our representative is through the IML RMA, they need to sit down with us and understand the way to properly place the value on these properties, because maybe they've been like this for 10 years or 15 years and nobody has ever really taken the time to educate us and guide us that how you're supposed to insure your buildings and whether individually or in aggregate. It's ridiculous that we're sitting here finding out after a claim that we've got buildings that were underinsured.
Right.
So really, I think that's the biggest issue on there is, okay, folks, it's not just renewing a premium. Somebody's got to come out here and do some assessments on these properties and making sure that they're insured for the correct values.
That's a good point, Mike.
I understand the meeting that we had is they basically based off of square foot. I brought the fact to put a large investment into the police garage for that bathroom that's over there for people to use. And he basically told me he valued that because there was 2 bathrooms before, 4 fixtures, and now it's 2. So I don't know how they add the value or decrease the value, but he says it's based on square footage, and that's all they use. So I don't know if it's accurate or not, but I explained to him that was, a business at one time where there were 2 bathrooms, only outside. He said, well, you had 4 fixtures originally, now you've only got 2. You've got a sink and a shower. So you took away value from that building, even though we put multiple dollars into that building to create that space. Well, I guess I don't quite understand how they do that.
I think that kind of goes back to what Mike said, is we need to sit down with our rep and find out, how do we value these properties? How often do we need to do it? What do they use to determine the value of a property? Is it just square footage? What other things do they look at? And then just make sure that we agree ahead of time, what is the value? Just like you do for your house. I mean, your house may have, it may be insured for $700,000 because that's what it might take to rebuild it and furnish it and those things. So we just need to make sure, what is our current value, and do we believe that that's a proper amount for it?
And again, too, is there replacement costs or economic value? Because certainly some of these buildings have a lot more utility value to us than maybe the real estate market value of them.
Correct.
I would like to comment real quick since you're on the topic. Basically what Trustee McKinnon had just brought up, Kelly got involved, and we did get one of the reps to come speak with us within the last 2 weeks, and he did define these things we're talking about. Certain buildings and assets do have actual cash value. Certain buildings and assets are only evaluated by the insurer, by their standards, what Jeff just spoke to, and then other ones pretty much hold their value, or we are responsible for dictating the replacement cost value. And then it's third member there is, what do we want to be on the hook to insure? So we did get that sideline, and I'll also touch briefly on what Attorney Gaziano said. The risk management side of IML has always been pretty good. When we get sued or threatened with a lawsuit, there's a lot of folks on our side. And additionally to that, we do get a lot of the health and safety benefits and training and flyers and safety requirements and not to be a broken record, but they do offer pre-COVID, of course, a lot of specific training environments that are free to us to go to. And again, if there was an accident situation, I think they would do very well. As far as the assets, the hardline assets and these claims right now for the hail damage and property damage, that has not been going good. And I'm pretty sure I've echoed that pretty far out. I'm on the phone every week for probably 2 or 3 different conferences with these folks. And on Monday and Tuesday, it's all happy-go-lucky. We're going to get it beat down by Wednesday, and then it's radio silence till Friday, and then we'll pick it back up on Monday. We did get the vehicles stabilized last week. At the end of last week, I had to stay perseverant and just keep hounding everybody. The buildings, I'm all over everybody. The assessor, third parties are coming back. But I would share that, like the gentleman or the firm that you brought up, that does happen in other municipalities. I believe Davis Junction and Monroe Center both go with a local broker, Byron Insurance Company. But again, I can't speak intelligently against what Attorney Gaziano said. I don't know if you can separate the risk management from your asset side or not. And then through this process, we found that we were overinsured in just a couple areas and severely underinsured in several other areas. So we're really rightening the ship right now in a really tough time. So appreciate the thoughts that you're having with it. And again, obviously I probably have just as much dealings with them now from all of our claims, etc. But I would echo what Mary said on the risk management side. Any issues we've had, they've done very well. But this asset side is a mixed bag right now. So I just wanted to share that with the board.
It sounds like to me, for what it's worth, this is Julie, maybe we need just a little more structure around our own process on how we review things. I know a good agent is all over us making sure we're doing things right, but we have some responsibility here too to make sure that we've got the appropriate coverages. And if we have to reach out to our IML people for that, then we have to do that. And I'm not putting criticism or blame on anyone here. It's just a matter of, as I'm listening to all the back and forth, and it sounds like IML is a good partner from a comprehensive standpoint. But we just have to make sure we have all our ducks in the row so that we are covered adequately.
Yeah, that's a good point, Julie. And we have had good representation with IML, RMA, and as Chad pointed out, they do provide a lot of extra services for free, and we just need to know what we're supposed to do and what they're supposed to do. And I guess we're getting a good education right now as to what we should have been doing versus what we did. So maybe going forward, we can sit down with a rep and say, okay, what do we need to let you know? And here's what we think, and maybe just work with them a little more one-on-one and make sure we're staying on top of it.
I mean, Chad, for what it's worth, I'm kind of fighting with my insurance now about my own damages too. So it goes all the way around.
This is Jeff White. I mean, is there any chance that you can get another source to give an estimate of what these buildings could potentially be worth, so we get an outside source? I know there might be some cost involved to get an estimate of the value, just like you do everything else, or a property or something like that. Would that be
Jeff,
time to get that done?
Right. If you're looking at trying to deal with the insurance company now that maybe you feel that IML RMA is not giving us the appropriate amount, that's one thing to try and say, okay, do we look for an appraiser? We'd have to look at our insurance policy with them, what our contract says, as to if we have a dispute to the value. And then it would tell us, how we have to go about it. If you're looking at for the future as to how do we value a property, an appraisal might be the way to go, but at the same time, the appraiser may not have a lot of comparables to compare it to. So, then you have to look at, okay, who do you look for? And that may be something we have to think about, is who would be in a position to tell us what is this village office building worth, and then know that we should insure it for that amount.
Well, and again, it's not market value. You got to figure out okay, if we lost an entire roof on here, what's that roof going to cost? and we're going to have, so it's probably going to have to get some opinions from some contractors and so forth on, hey, if this whole building got collapsed, what's it going to cost me to rebuild it?
Right.
Or, if I have a major roof repair, what's it going to cost to re-roof it? And those are really going to set what just like your house, your home insurance is probably, or your economic value of your house, you're insuring it for more than market value, because if you ever, had a major problem, before you build the house back up, you got to tear it down.
Right.
So or even worse, if you have a half of a house destructed, you got to tie it all together or whatever. So, and I do know, because we just went through that with ours on there, that, every year they raise their value, 3, 4, 5% every year. Sooner or later, you got to go back, and they do have at least on the residential side, they do have a program that factors in, is it a single story, 2-story type of construction, square foot, and so forth, to help you arrive at what that, loss value potentially is. A little harder on commercial buildings.
So I think kind of to put together, Jeff, what you're saying and what Chad is saying is we probably do need to meet with our rep after the fact and just kind of find out what do we need to provide, how can, and they can kind of tell us this is what we're looking at in terms of insurance, but then we have to understand from them, okay, what information do we need to gather, and do we need to look at a contractor like Mike said? So I think once we have an opportunity, we probably do need to have a few people sit down with IML, whether it's through a phone conference or an in-person meeting, and go through this.
Yeah, probably the fair error we made in recent years is we look at the rebid and we never really got to look at what the base was that was being quoted from, and, lessons learned.
Right, exactly.
And I want to reiterate, we did just do that. We did just meet with Blaine Kurth, and we went kind of through this, and it was basically all the topics that have been covered here. That there are a few that the insurance will stand fast, and they'll say, hey, it's a metal building with a metal roof. We're going to come at it with this square footage. If it's your well houses, that it's a different type of thing. So we take your word for what you say. And then, on our utility side, we're blessed with the fact that we did updates all in the last 10 years. So they're all very accurate. There was a lot of missed things. We found out the downtown street lights weren't covered. Our privately owned street lights have not been covered at all. The lighted diamond, that's very pricey. All of those lights received damage. They weren't covered at all. But we did have to remember, and I think that maybe my predecessor was cared more about what the premium cost was. So I was trying to keep the premium cost low, because of course, if we start overvaluing any of these buildings or exact valuing some of these buildings, our premium is obviously going to be driven up. And like Jeff said, we did have some statements, but the rebuttal from the insurance company was certain buildings are going to be evaluated as per their computer program, and then other ones like utility specific, we dictate what their net worth is. So we have done that exercise, and Kelly did organize it, and it was supposed to happen a month and a half ago, and COVID got in the way. Our rep was he had to be quarantined. He didn't have it, but he had to be quarantined and tested, and we had a social distance meeting on site in the village. So we're doing baby steps in all these directions we talked about in that matter.
Okay. So what I'm gathering is we don't need to rush right out and find quotes to compare right now. We just need to kind of make sure we understand our insurance, see what the values are and the premiums are going to be. And if we think the premiums are too high, then we have to reevaluate the value of the buildings. But again, that's what insurance is for, is to make us whole again. And if we're underinsured, well, maybe we need to be better insured and pay higher premiums, and that's just a cost of what we have to do. So so maybe we should just look into that aspect.
I also want to add, at that last meeting where Blaine was present, Chad let Blaine know that the response hadn't been as good as we expected, and he did take care of that situation, I do believe. because they do outsource some of their insurance, I think, the third-party processes.
And that's good to know, because I know Blaine, we've dealt with him before, and he's a good guy. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that it might be a third party, and that they might be
Yeah.
able to do something about that.
Yeah, that's the absolute truth. We have a great relationship with Blaine. He's strong on the RMA side, where I spoke about before. And yes, all of our assessments for damage were done by third parties. And there's been a lot more attention given it since Blaine was here. And some folks have been put on notice, and a little more fact finding's been done, and we're kind of shuffled back to the front of their attention right now. So I'll reiterate and appreciate what Kelly said and agree 100%.
All right. Well, thanks, Kelly, for bringing that up, and Chad for verifying that. So again, I'm not going to reach out to anybody right now to look for comparisons, but that is something that we can do when we're ready to do that. Next item, 7, discussion, governor's executive order requiring face masks. We had brought, or this was on the agenda before. I'd put it on the agenda several months ago. It might have been April's meeting or else May's meeting. And when I brought it up, I believe all the trustees did not want to address the mask issue in terms of having an ordinance in place requiring businesses to require masks to be worn at businesses, and felt that it should be up to the individual business owners to do that. And so we went that route. I was contacted by Mayor McNamara. It's been now, about 3 weeks or so ago. And because there was going to be an uptick in the COVID positive testing, there were concerns that if it went too high, Governor Pritzker would go from phase 4 back to phase 3. And we didn't want to do that. So I reached out to each of you to see if you would supporting the governor's position of wearing masks. And I think all of you to a point agreed to that, but also, we're concerned about how would we enforce it and who would enforce it and how involved we get. And you may have heard over the last couple of days, I think it was about 2 or 3 days ago, the governor did issue a press release about additional emergency rules that he wants to have in place regarding businesses and wearing face masks. And he issued the press release, but it's not a mandate, it's not mandatory, it's not in effect yet. What he's asking is that rules be provided. And again, JCAR is going to meet to discuss this. And I believe it's a committee of 12 people in this legislature. And they have to approve, or at least I think 8 out of the 12 have to approve of these. And initially he wants to go with giving a warning to a business. And then secondly, if they don't voluntarily comply, have the patrons leave the business. And then if they still don't comply, then to have it be considered a Class A misdemeanor with fines ranging from $75 to $2,500. So that is something that the governor is seeking. The last time he wanted to go down this road, JCAR and the legislature were not going to support it, so he withdrew it. And I bring that up just so you understand that he has an executive order that we have to wear masks and that businesses are required to have people wear masks in them, but there's nothing further than that. And again, a municipality can decide if the municipality wants to have businesses wear masks. And so I thought I would bring it back up to you just to see if there's any change, if you still want to just keep it the way it is. I don't necessarily have a preference. I just wanted to bring it back up to see if there's any thoughts of whether you want to change what we're doing or just keep it the same. And just also, as everyone probably has noticed, if you go to businesses around here, most every business requires face masks. I know Sullivan's does. I know other places do. I see at Culver's and Taco Bell and other places that people are wearing masks that work there. One place I noticed that people were not really wearing masks was when I went into the mobile gas station. The employees were, but the patrons weren't. And it was just, one time when I was there, I saw 3 or 4 people walking in and out without a face mask and were not asked to have a face mask. So again, it's, most of the businesses that I've seen, the employees are complying with wearing a face mask. And if you want to just move on to the next one, we can move on to the next item too.
This is Lori.
Personally, I think what we have is working. Sorry, Lori, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Julie. I think our businesses are doing what they need to do. I don't know that they need any assistance from us at this point.
Okay. And I think as Jeff White pointed out before, what we would do is if a business requires the use of face masks and a patron will not do it, then the business owner obviously can call 911 and have the police come down, because now we have somebody that's trespassing or maybe assaulting somebody, doing something like that. So then the business can contact the police and the police can get involved at that point, because now it's going to be a criminal type of situation rather than just a mask violation. So is everybody kind of on board with just leaving it the way we have it and not really taking any further action?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So now we can go on to item 8, which is future meeting dates. Sally Jo?
Public Works.
I guess the first question I have, are we going to do individual meetings again in September, or are you going to resurrect the cow at some point? What's the direction?
I'm up for either one. So,
well, because I guess we'll put it this way. Obviously, we've got Labor Day coming up, so Public Works has established Wednesday, September the 9th at 5 o'clock as our meeting date. If the intention was go to cow, as we would yield to that.
Why don't we just go ahead and have individual meetings unless someone has any reason not to? We can just have our individual committee meetings.
Okay, so Public Works is Wednesday, the 9th of September, 5 o'clock.
Police.
To be determined.
Finance.
Thursday, September 10th at 5:15.
Community Development.
To be announced.
Nick talked about the 4th of July. Did you have a date when you talked about it?
This is Jeff White. He's shaking his head in the negative. So that would
Okay.
say there is not a date.
Okay. Liquor.
To be determined?
Parent water would be 9/14 if needed. Admin is to be determined, right?
Correct.
WIPC is October 21st at 5:30.
Correct.
Tech Prairie Path.
That's September 18th at 9:30 a.m. That's at the Pecatonica Library.
That's it, right? Unless you have any more on that Winbursue NIMS training.
Nope.
Okay.
Don't have anything else.
All right.
Okay, so let's go on to new business. I do have something for new business. I think the previous meeting we talked about Azavar and how they were trying to find money for the village, and they looked at ComEd as a possibility that they owed us money. And Sally was able to reach out to Scott Schamberg at Azavar, and he didn't have a list of every mayor, but he did have a bunch of municipalities that had signed off on the letter. Dixon's one of them. Genoa's one of them. Hampshire, Harvard, Marengo, Oregon. So I think those are ones that they have signed the letters. There are probably about another 30 or 40 or so, actually probably 50 or more that are on here that signed it, but those are the closer ones that have signed it. So again, this was a letter to ComEd from, which would be from the village, just saying that we feel that they were not following up and addressing the issue in a timely manner, and we feel that they should, in essence, respond and pay up. So if you want me to sign that letter, I can. If you want to think about it and let me know, I can do that as well.
Well, since they were giving all our money to Madigan, I might as well sign the letter.
Yeah, might as well. Anyone opposed to the letter being signed? Would you want more opportunity?
I think we were in support of it before. We just didn't necessarily like the tonality of the letter, but based on Julie's comment, why should we care?
Right, exactly. So I will go ahead and sign that letter then. And all right. The next item I have is I received from the mail a letter from the Village of Pecatonica. They have 2 indemnity agreements, and it's regarding Winnebago police officer being in the employ of the Village of Pecatonica. And this is something that Mary has spoken with the Village of Pecatonica's attorney about, and I'm going to go ahead and scan a copy and send it to Mary for her to review, just to make sure that it does contain the language that she provided to their attorney. But it has been signed by the Pecatonica village president, and it's been attested to by the village clerk. And just wanted to get from you if it's approved, if Mary looks at it and says, yep, it's the similar language we had before when we did this, if I could get the approval to go ahead and sign this without having to wait till the next board meeting.
This is Mike McKinnon. I motion to authorize President Eubank to sign the documents pending review by Attorney Gaziano.
This is Don. I second it.
And I probably am going out of turn because this is new business, and I'm not sure that we can bring it up for a vote under new business. And Mary, if you want to chime in on that, but we can probably take a poll and then bring it up at the September meeting for ratification.
That's what I was waiting for everybody to finish speaking, but that's what I was going to suggest. And also, just to let you know, I had conversation with Attorney Doug Henry. Oh gosh, it's been probably a month now. But when he said to me, just get me what you want them to sign. So I'll just take a look at it, but I'm expecting that it will be in the form that I gave it to him.
From what I can remember, Mary, it looks like it has it in there, but I'll scan and email it to you.
Okay.
So just, I guess, does any trustee have any opposition to me signing it if everything's appropriate?
Nope.
Okay. All right, so I will go ahead and take care of that. And that's it for new business for me. Does anybody else have any new business?
I guess the only thing, just as a technicality on that motion, we had a motion and a second, so is that being withdrawn at this point since we determined it to be done by consensus?
I withdraw the motion.
Thank you.
Withdraw the second.
Thanks. All right, thanks, Mary, for that. And any other new business?
Mike, I just have a question. This is Jeff White. About a month and a half ago, had a conversation with Erica Kelty from the insurance company here in town, and she said the insurance agent had donated $1,500 for first responders. $1,500 went to the police department here, and $1,500 went to the fire department. I was just curious as if number one, if that money is, my understanding was supposed to be directly for the police department. I haven't heard anything about that from anybody here or not.
Okay, so Jeff, you were kind of breaking up when you were talking, but it's my understanding that Erica Kilty said that there was someone that donated $3,000, $1,500 to the Village Winnebago Police Department and $1,500 to Winburn Sioux Fire Department. And you don't have any record of the Village Police Department receiving that $1,500. So you're asking if we have received it, where it went?
Right, exactly. It wasn't a donation through them. It was the actual insurance company themselves that donated.
So like Country Companies or one of those companies did it?
Yes.
Okay.
We did receive that money. I know I put it in the general fund. I'm not sure if I just put it under miscellaneous, but I can check on that as soon as I have internet access.
I know. She said it was specific to first responders, law, fire departments, and stuff like that. So I didn't know what happened to it. I never heard any more about it. She said she tried to get an actual physical check to present to us, but they just said they deposited it directly into our account. So I was just curious as to where that was at and what the status was.
Okay. So Sally, just go ahead and look for that information and let us know. And then any other new business? All right, hearing none, if we can have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second, Julie.
All right, Julie. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, so the meeting is now adjourned at 9:08 p.m.
Thank
You did a
you.
good job.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Good night. Night. Oh my God.